Hi, I'm Nat Barrett and today I'm joined by Dr. Will Brooker at Falmouth University. We're going to talk about his recent writings on Batman, including his most recent book, Hunting the Dark Knight.
Hi.
As a commentator on the Batman universe, you frequently get referred to as Dr. Batman. Can you explain where your interest in Batman started and how did it encourage you to take that further and create it as a career?
Well, when I first got interested in Batman, I wasn't thinking of making it a career. I was like 3. My interest in Batman stemmed from repeats of the 1960s television show. This was in the early 1970s, and the comic books of the time. The interesting thing about it is the comic books of the time are now considered to be quite gritty, realistic and relatively dark compared to the TV show. They're actually a reboot of the Batman after the TV show ended, whereas the TV show is well known for being quite campy, pantomime, over the top and playful. But as a 3-year-old, well I say 3-year-old to 5-year-old, I don't know, quite a young person, I saw no distinction between the campy Batman and the gritty, more serious Batman, and I just thought they were all adventures of the same character. So I think that's quite significant in terms of the way, I think it informs my view of Batman now, that we can understand, we can embrace and entertain many different ideas, many facets of the same character, and treat them all as part of the same sort of crazy quilt or a mosaic of a cultural icon. We don't have to rule out the campy side or the more theatrical side and only treat the dark, gritty, militaristic as the pure Batman. So as a kid I liked all different types of Batman. I think that has informed my enjoyment of Batman now. But obviously one doesn't watch Batman Adam West in 1973 and plan a career as Dr. Batman. I don't think I even knew what a Dr. Batman was at the time. That only really started when I did my PhD in 1996.
How did you get started on the more academic side?
How did I get started? Well, I did a BA in Film and English Studies at University of East Anglia, Norwich, in 1988 to 1991. That was 50% film with some television and cultural studies. After that I did a filmmaking diploma at Goldsmiths College in New Cross in London. And then I did a part-time, I was teaching part-time after that, and then I did a part-time MA in Film and Television at Westminster. And that was all before my PhD in Cultural Studies at Cardiff. So I spent quite a long time in education, basically. My first degree was 50% English literature, so it's fairly traditional. But I think even at that point I was trying to write about comics, actually. I was trying to get comics into every essay that I could. I remember writing about comics of the time, like the Vertigo titles of the early 1990s. I wrote a long essay on the comic Doom Patrol, for instance. My postgraduate diploma dissertation was on Grant Morrison's comic Dare and the New Adventures of Hitler. So I was trying to write about comics at every opportunity I could. Around the same time, the discipline of fan studies was growing. So I was trying to do something without it being in any kind of framework, and at the same time, an academic framework was being established, and the two sort of came together. By the time I was a PhD student, I realised I was actually part of an emerging discipline.
How, in your view, does the academic analysis of popular culture, comics, books and films add to our understanding and enjoyment of films?
I think it adds to our enjoyment to think about how things work and why they work. When you're watching a film, you can watch it in various ways. You can watch it with different parts of your brain turned off and on, and I certainly don't always watch things in a particularly analytical way, but in fact sometimes I think when I'm enjoying the film less, when I'm drawn into the plot and characters less, that's when I notice the mise-en-scène more. When you notice the editing more is when you're sort of quite distanced from the story. I mean, if you're into the characters, you shouldn't be noticing the cuts. But I think it does add to our enjoyment to think this is having an effect on me, and to recognise that and think, well, how is it having that effect? Certainly, maybe if you watch it a second time. I mean, you can watch something the first time and become involved in it and drawn into it and connect with it emotionally. Something like Blade Runner, which is obviously a very rich text. It's probably the film I've watched the most. You can watch it multiple times, and once the story and the characters are absolutely familiar to you, you can be concentrating on things like the decor, on the editing, on the pace, on the lighting, and so you can try and work out how it's achieving what it's achieving.
When discussing Batman, you once said, he's just a man, and yet he walks with gods and holds his own. You frequently mention...
Can't argue with that.
And you frequently mention he has this likability because he's ultimately just a man who has no special powers, just a wide range of resources. What else do you feel makes Batman such an iconic and well-loved character?
I don't think he's likeable at all. I don't think Batman is remotely likeable, actually. Well, maybe some incarnations. Adam West's version is kind of likeable. I think if Batman was here, none of us would like him at all. And I don't think he'd like any of us. I think he's probably a very antisocial and quite unpleasant character. I mean, as Bruce Wayne, I think he has social skills, but I think they're all put on. Yeah. You know, he's very good at putting on a social front, but he doesn't really want to be doing that. Bruce Wayne is the fake personality. So is he likeable? Well, as a person, I think Batman is not likeable. As a character, Batman is fascinating, I think, fascinating and complex. And, you know, admirable. You could admire someone without... I don't think he'd be anyone's friend. He wouldn't be any of our friends, you know. He really wouldn't hang out with us at all, you or me. He particularly wouldn't like me, I think. Sorry, what was the question? I got so caught up in imagining Batman was here.
What do you feel that makes him such an iconic...
Would I shake his hand? He would break my hand. Yeah. What do I think make him so iconic? Well, okay, I think he's an appealing character because, in theory, we could be Batman. In theory, anyone could be Batman, and that includes women. Women could also be Batman. I mean, Batman is like a role. Batman is a persona, and we see in Christopher Nolan's last film that Batman is a mask that different people can wear, and that's often true in the comics as well. That Batman isn't just Bruce Wayne. There have been Batmen before him. His father was a Batman at one point in some stories, and there are Batmen after him. For instance, his son and his descendants might become a different type of Batman. There's a Batman of the future who lives on Pluto, for instance, in one story. I think he's like the only person on Pluto. But anyway, Batman is a role rather than a person. And because he isn't like the last son of Krypton or anything, or an Amazonian or the fastest man alive, we can maintain this illusion in our heads that say, if we experienced a personal tragedy and really worked hard and trained up really hard and studied really hard and came with some money, we could be Batman. So, you know, it's achievable in the way that Superman is not achievable. You could sort of be Batman. You could sort of tell yourself, if I really started tomorrow, 10 years, maybe I could be Batman.
With recent events like the shootings in Aurora and with the recent interview that Quentin Tarantino took part in, how do you think that events like this have changed fans' perceptions of the films, and how has it changed the text?
I don't think it has changed the text. I mean, I think the texts are what they are. Yeah. Texts are open to multiple readings. There are going to be some unfortunate, disturbed individuals who are going to read violent messages into all kinds of texts. I mean, I guess some texts are more open to that than others. We have to remember, you know, many people have assassinated, have killed based on the holy books, the Bible and the Quran. You know, the man who shot John Lennon was supposedly inspired by The Catcher in the Rye, which is not really a violent book at all. So, yeah, you know, there is violence in Batman films, but I think most people, the vast majority of people, fortunately, are going to go to that film and not be inspired to commit any acts of violence. And people who are likely to commit acts of violence, I think their minds, their disturbed and unusual minds, can be shaped by any number of texts. I mean, like in a nursery rhyme or something, someone could probably read Alice in Wonderland and go out on a killing spree. I don't really think the text is to blame.
Yeah. Do you think this has changed the way that fans who are going to see the films anyway have taken it, especially with the closing down of quite a lot of the first screenings of The Dark Knight Rises?
Well, I think it was a terrible shame. Well, look, I mean, more than a terrible shame. It was a tragedy. I think it was a shame in kind of popular cultural terms that the release of the film was overshadowed by the behaviour of one disturbed criminal individual. And I was asked to kind of comment on it at the time, and I deliberately didn't mention the shooter's name to the extent that I can't even quite remember it now, which was deliberate, because I don't think people should become notorious. I don't think their names should become known at all. I think, if anything, the names of the victims, the people who lost their lives, should become known. But I really don't think we should try and give fame and notoriety to people who try and seize on that sort of popular moment and popular text for their own warped benefit.
Recently, you've started working on your own comic book series, My So-Called Secret Identity. Could you explain a little bit more about this project?
My So-Called Secret Identity is a project which launched about 3 weeks ago online with the first issue for free. It's a superhero comic. It was about 15 months in development, and it was really based on an experience when I went straight from a comic shop near Kingston University, where I work, back into a PhD induction that I was leading, and was struck by the contrast between the stereotypical kind of pin-up cheesecake images of women in the comic shop, to the extent that I couldn't connect with them at all. To be honest, I would have felt embarrassed buying them and walking down the street with them. And then the female PhD students I was teaching, and it just struck me that even though Batgirl was supposed to be a PhD student originally, in fact she was supposed to have a PhD, I couldn't really ever remember seeing any young women like the young women who were surrounding me in the room in the comics. So it's the difference between the very limited representation of women in the comics and the gulf between that and so many of the women I actually knew who were just very intelligent. It struck me, we don't usually see people who are women in comics who are not like models or especially athletic, but just are very good at putting things together in their heads. And that was the spark for that.
So what are you looking forward to in continuing this series with?
Well, it's I've got 5 episodes written. The first episode is now out. We've attracted about 1,500 fans on Facebook, 500 plus on Twitter. We've had like reviews in Ms Magazine, The Guardian, Times Higher Education. It's been very well received. We've raised an awful lot of money. Some of the money's gone to charity, a women's outreach charity called A Way Out. So the artists are currently drawing episode 2. We've got 5 episodes in volume 1, and then 5 more in volume 2, and 5 more in volume 3. So it's a trilogy, like the Dark Knight trilogy. It's a trilogy about Catherine Abigail. Daniel's the main character. But beyond that, it's a kind of world where other stories could be told with other characters and other points in history.
As a man, why were you so interested in creating such a female-empowered one? And has this always been an interest for you?
Well, I think as a human we should be interested in strong women, really. We should be interested in strong people. I don't think it really matters what your gender is. You still want to see fair and accurate representation of everyone in comics, and I don't think it really benefits anyone, men or women, if all the women in comics seem to, well, if most of the women in comics seem to fit a certain kind of pin-up role. I think anyone, male or female, should want to read about interesting characters. I suppose, just personally, I just felt these comics aren't really offering me anything, and more than that, I feel embarrassed to buy them, really, and I think that's a shame, because I do like comics. I do like superhero comics, and I just think I think you can retain the form, retain the genre. I like the genre of superhero comics very much. I just think you could do something different from what was being done. And, it's just a question of writing interesting characters. It's not necessarily just writing interesting female characters.
This year, there's a lot of superhero films coming to the forefront.
I guess so.
Are you looking forward to any specifically in the cinema?
Well, I don't have any personal investment really in anything beyond Batman. I mean, Batman has become a kind of a career thing for me. But in a way, that's a bonus, because if Iron Man 3 is no good, I don't really care. It's not really going to break my heart. If they made a new Batman film, see, if they brought Batman back in a Justice League film with Christian Bale, and they messed that up, I would be sorry about that, because I think the Christopher Nolan trilogy is quite a nice completed story. Iron Man 3 looks quite interesting for what it is. I think we've got an increasing Nolanisation of films where all the superheroes seem to have to lose their houses and fall down a pit and climb out of the pit and lose all their money and stuff, and it's all very dark. Man of Steel, I think, looks quite interesting. I'll be open to seeing that. Superman has never really grabbed me very much, because I think he's just everything's too easy for him, really. Yeah, I don't think that's a very interesting character, because, it's a god, really. I mean, nothing much can hurt him. Kick-Ass, be quite interested in seeing what they do with that. What other superhero films are coming out this year?
I think there's Thor and the other...
Yeah, Thor, those films are okay. I mean, they've just become a massive franchise now. I think they're good entertaining popcorn movies. I don't think they're especially memorable. They're certainly good fun. I mean, what they do, what things like the Avengers does, it does well. Yeah. It is entertaining. It's like it's like a fairground ride, isn't it? I'm not saying that Christopher Nolan's Batman films are high art exactly, but I think The Dark Knight was particularly challenging and fascinating, and actually a haunting film. And I don't think the Avengers really came close to that in terms of, The Dark Knight really made you think, I think, about ethical choices and morality and politics a little bit.
In terms of what we talk about quite frequently is 3D, do you think it's enhancing or taking away from the experience of especially superhero movies?
Well, Nolan avoided 3D, actually. Nolan went for IMAX. I think they're like 50% IMAX in Dark Knight Rises. To be honest with you, I felt that was quite a distraction, because it went from the normal aspect ratio to IMAX. And when it went back, you really felt a limitation. If you felt like, you know, the screen's shrinking, and that breaks me out of the experience. I think the way I personally feel is that if a story is good enough, you should be able to watch it on a postage stamp size screen, like on a plane, and get drawn into it. I don't really think we should need 3D to become more immersed in it. I think what leads us to become immersed is story and character. I don't know, maybe I'm not the right kind of audience, the right kind of age for 3D, but I don't think I've seen any film that's really persuaded me that it's more than gimmickry. There's a few moments in Life of Pi which are quite interesting in 3D. I don't know, Avengers, again, it just adds to the sense of being like on a fairground ride. I don't know. I don't think I'm really persuaded that 3D adds an awful lot to the artistic experience.
Are we in need of a new female superhero movie, perhaps based on your comic?
Yes, we are.
Okay, well, thank you very much for coming down and talking to us about it today. It was a pleasure.
Oh, thanks very much.